Welcome, everyone, those here at Yale participating in person and the many more that are participating via Zoom. My name is Claudia Valegia. I am a professor of anthropology here at Yale and the chair of the Council on Latin American and Iberian Studies. And it is a great pleasure to introducing you to our guest today. So I am delighted to welcome you to, and our distinguished guest, to the first event of the Latin American Policy Leader Series. The series, and this is a mouthful, the series is generously supported by the George Herbert Walker Jr. Lecture Fund in International Studies at the MacMillan Center for International Area Studies. I just said it all in one. First, a brief thanks, should be longer, but a brief thanks to the many people involved in organizing today's event. Our team at CLICE, particularly Agustina and Aisha and Josh, for being a wonderful team supporting this event. Then the Fox International Fellowship Program, the Program on Peace and Development at the Yale MacMillan Center, and the Office of International Affairs. Thank you all. Before I introduce our speaker and moderator today, I want to share a few words about our Latin American Policy Leader Series. Latin America is the home to some of the world's largest democracies, and the region has made enormous strides in consolidating democratic norms and human rights since the end of the Cold War. The Latin American Policy Leader Series seeks to create dialogue about the future of democratization, human rights, and development with policy leaders from across the region. Our hope is to engage these leaders in vigorous and respectful discussion about pressing issues. As part of the series, we are pleased to welcoming the former Environmental Minister of Ecuador and President of the World Wildlife Fund International, Yolanda Cacabatze, on March 11th, so mark your calendars. On April 19th, we will host a discussion with the President of the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, Ricardo Pérez Manrique. And on May 20th, we will wrap up the series with Maria Noel Baeza, Regional Director of Latin American and the Caribbean for the UN Women. Now, regarding today's event and our speaker, I am delighted to introduce the Secretary General of the Organization of American States, Dr. Luis Almagro, who is originally from Uruguay and is a lawyer by profession. He's currently serving his second term as Secretary General of the Organization of American States. The Secretary General was Uruguay's foreign minister between 2010 and 2015. During his tenure, Uruguay welcomed former prisoners from Guantanamo, granted asylum to dozens of Syrian families who were victims of civil war, and secured endorsement of the group of Latin American Caribbean countries, GRULAC, for its election to a seat on the United Nations Security Council in January 2016. He was also ambassador to China for 3 years, after occupying senior diplomatic posts in his country's foreign ministry and its embassies in Germany and Iran. In addition, he was elected as a senator in Uruguay's national elections in October 2014. Luis Almagro was first elected as Secretary General of the OAS in March 18, 2015, with the support of 33 of the 34 member states and 1 abstention. He was re-elected for a second term on May 20, 2020. After the Secretary General's remarks, our CLICE faculty member, Professor Ana de la O, will sit up in our living room here for a discussion before opening up for questions and answer sessions with those in this room and also attendees that are joining us virtually. Ana de la O is a professor in the Department of Political Science here at Yale and is also the Director of Undergraduate Studies for Latin American Studies, which is our signature major, and those of you who are considering majors as students, please contact Anna or the CLIES for more information. She's also affiliated with the Institute of Social and Policy Studies and the Jackson School of Global Affairs. Her research relates to the political economy of poverty alleviation, clientelism, and the provisions of public goods. Professor de la O is the author of numerous articles in journals such as the American Journal of Political Science and the Journal of Politics, as well as the book Crafting Policies to End Poverty in Latin America, a must read. She teaches courses on the political economy of poverty alleviation, paradigms of political economy, the politics of redistribution, and quantitative research methods. Thank you so much, Anna, for lending your expertise and moderating our conversation today. I understand the Secretary General will make some brief remarks, so please listen in and be ready with any questions for the Q&A session. And I want to add a personal anecdote here. I am here presiding this event, in part thanks to the OAS. I came to the United States to do my PhD with funding from the OAS, a loan that we religiously paid together with my husband on monthly installments that allowed us to pursue our degree without having to work outside. So thank you to the OAS. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Secretary General of OAS, Luis Almagro. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all of you. It's a great pleasure to be here. Strengthening democracy in Latin America and the Caribbean, progress and peace development. If we see the hemisphere, of course, we may see some serious challenges related to the state of democracy in some countries, the conditions for progress and development always uncertain, and the conditions of peace are related to security matters and, of course, the challenges that we have in the hemisphere. So all this means that we have, I will have to enlist some failures related to all this. As you may imagine, democracy is not always so healthy. Security is not always available for all Latin Americans, Caribbean people. Development is always uncertain in the hemisphere. We need to do something else in order to jump out of the trap of underdevelopment that we always are. Of course, for me there is an obvious conclusion looking at the hemisphere. The better the democracy, the better the conditions for development, the better are the conditions for security, better conditions for access to rights and equity. Democracy it means best possible citizens, best possible institutions as strong as possible, efficient institutions that can deliver to the people, that can provide to the people, that can find solutions for the structural problems of the people. Of course, we have some structural problems. Some of them, they have been with us for the 200 years of independent life. I think, of course, we have also new wounds. Old grievances, new grievances, old wounds, new wounds. We have a structural problem the past 200 years. We are the most unequal region in the world. And this not just means inequality in the context of wealth distribution, but also access to rights. We are very unequal how people access to rights in our hemisphere. We still discriminate a lot. We still have a lot of serious challenges in order to resolve the conditions for everybody to have a fair life and opportunities in the hemisphere. we are facing serious problems related to this. Inequality, it affects our democracies, but it affects also our levels of development. We a better democracy, and of course we need to have better conditions of equality in the hemisphere, better access to rights for people, and to be able from there to have better conditions for development. If we think that the inequality is just a political issue, we are wrong. Inequality is an issue, a cross-cutting issue that affects practically every level of life, of the life that we live in the hemisphere. We have, of course, a lot of challenges ahead. We have to fix this. We have not worked hard in the past 200 years. We have a big problem about that. I always mention the case of the rules for the land reform of Artigas 1815, that refers that que los más infelices sean los más privilegiados. Those unhappy, those most vulnerable to be the most privileged in the context of politics. And he identified the main vulnerable groups in what it was the Banda Oriental then. And they were widows with children, they were Afro-descendant population, they were indigenous people. 200 years later, we have the same pattern of poverty in the country. We have single mothers count for a lot of the poverty of the region, of the country. Afro-descendant people, they count for 8% of the population and for 40% of the poverty. And indigenous people, they were exterminated after immediately after the independence, so they don't count anymore. That means we really have some serious structural problems, because that is considered the most equal country among Latin Americans is still the one that it still have the very same structural problems that it has had for quite a while. We are supposed to come from very liberal ideas. Our independence, our constitutions, they were like they have a democratic vocation. Most of them, they took the Thomas Paine, and they took the principles of the American Revolution, of the French Revolution. But when we scratch it a little bit, just a little bit, we know that we are highly paternalistic, we are unequal, we have patterns of racism practically everywhere. We have this poverty, structural poverty in the hemisphere. So we still have a lot to do to put this liberal mind, these liberal ideas, these advanced constitutions and legislation into practice, to bring solutions for the real people. That it depends where they were born, and the class, the neighborhood, the region in the country, and of course race and gender and other levels of inequality and discrimination that exist in the region. And of course, this all brings patterns of exclusion and polarization. And I am resuming the problems in order that those are the things that we need to address. We need to address this in order to have better democracies. We need to address this in order to have a better possibility for development. Exclusion and polarization, it comes with what I have just said, of the levels of inequality, of this cross-cutting inequality in our countries. We have in the past years, we even moved to further polarization in our countries. Sometimes we have seen in the region two projects impossible to reconciliate between each other, passing to the second round of elections. And maybe sometimes because citizens, they look for radical approach for solutions, sometimes on the one side or the other side, sometimes because we are just losing the common ground, sometimes because we are not able to handle properly the political discussion, the political participation that comes with social media. We have all these challenges ahead. It has been very hard for us to develop a substantial and constructive and positive agenda based on our political discussions. And we have been falling apart in these discussions, becoming more and more polarized. And not only polarization, it goes sometimes to the enemization of the political adversary, what is even more irrational. And it's not, and that brings another problem, that is, you remain in power no matter what. And that remaining in power is always the base for some people, of course, to get some immunity, impunity, or amnesty. And it has been proved in this hemisphere that no dictator is safe from the long memory of human rights justice or the long arm of human rights justice. So that the only way dictators remain impune is because they remain in power. That is the only way for amnesty. That is the only way for immunity, for impunity. The impunity that comes from remaining in power, whatever the cost may be. And we have seen in that sense that we passed from one dictatorship in the hemisphere to 3 dictatorships in some 4 or 5 years, 6, 7 years. Maybe some processes were more accelerated, some processes were more gradual, but it went that way, looking for these conditions of impunity, of immunity. And that, of course, are the challenges of dealing also with a zero-sum mentality that is taking a lot from us. It's like we are not able to find the way that we can work together, but how we can defeat the other and how we can take advantage of that victory. We have to. We are looking for relevance in the wrong way. We need to look for relevance based on the solutions that we find for our people. How we eliminate discrimination, how we eliminate poverty, how we eliminate inequality, how we create better conditions for the people to integrate and to consolidate a common ground that may allow institutions to work in the long term, to execute plans in the long term, to design plans in the long term. All this, it means sometimes going back to square one, institutions going back to square one, political system going back to square one, or just holding to power in no matter what, no matter how bad is your humanitarian crisis, no matter how bad is your migration crisis, no matter how bad is your corruption, no matter how bad are your human rights violations, just remain in power. And that school of thought, regrettably, is something that we also have in this hemisphere, also have we among Latin Americans. What we do how we deal with political systems is we try to bring stability and we try to strengthen democratic institutions. We try to create conditions for transparent government. We try to create the conditions for the better projects that can bring and develop according to the pillars of the organization: democracy, access to rights, security. The thing is that this is a serious challenge, and you expect an organization with not enough financial resources, not enough human resources to fix these 4 pillars in a practically 100% efficient way. and in a context, of course, that we have today of conflict, of social and political conflict escalation. But the solution is this. The OES, it means multilateralism, and that it means stability. That is how we work, how we create conditions that can bring better democratic governance, and that is how we push. More or less, most of the time, we end being a moral force, and that is the thing of the organization. I mean, our projects cannot have the scale of financial institutions, but we are a strong moral force in creating conditions that can help some governments, democratic governments and democratic institutions to stabilize and to face the threats that they have. The threats that they have that are related to the existential threats that we have in the hemisphere. And I go to Caribbean and Central American countries, for example. First of one, the one that is challenging their own existence is climate change. I mean, we have a group of small islands that year by year are devastated by hurricanes. 2-3 countries in the Caribbean countries, Central American countries, they deeply affected by what is going on in climate change in the world. And for us, climate change is not a rhetoric, it's not a speech, it is something that it brings a serious impact to millions of people, thousands of people every year. We are the first frontier of climate change. Practically no other region in the world has this impact, serious impact every year that we are facing. The other existential threat is security. We have a serious challenge there, and something that we definitely need to address. We are 8% of the world population. We count for 38% of violent death. And we have 15 of the 20 most violent cities in the world. We are definitely far to deliver solutions from the crisis and the terror that organized crime and drug trafficking is bringing to our countries in the hemisphere. We have not been able to reverse that. I think we need stronger and more efficient institutions that definitely each country can hardly have. If you look at the budget of a drug trafficking organization compared to what may have in a police station somewhere in our countries, definitely they are far behind, and they have far stronger, harder challenges than anybody. We need international cooperation for that. We need a permanent engagement of developed countries, bringing better conditions of security to our countries, and of course a better regional cooperation related to this matter. And that at certain moment that we can depend ourselves, because our police is much more professional, because our judges are far more efficient, and because our prosecutors are better when they investigate. We have all these challenges in order to create a security matrix for the continent. The other existential threat is corruption, and the conditions of lack of transparency. Definitely, transparency are always there. We have not been able to overcome. Maybe we are doing better than in previous years, but more of the political system is scrutinized, more of the political system is investigated, and there are more prosecutions related to corruption in public affairs. Nevertheless, we are far from what it should be, and the fight of corruption starts to avoiding that every government in action is affected by that. It doesn't mean to indulge the previous corruption, but it doesn't mean to persecute the previous administration. That it can never work as a way of fighting corruption. Fighting corruption should be a general thing, starting by yourself, by what you do, and the challenges that you have about your own moral and your Republican probity that you can deliver. And the fourth challenge is, of course, the fourth existential threat are dictatorships, and we are having more dictatorships, as I said, and they really affect, because they bring all the bad practices to the hemisphere and to the political systems of the hemisphere. Bad practices are very contagious, are very difficult to control even. To bring good practices from one country to other, you need a project, you need financing, you need experts, you need a lot of work and a chronogram to execute that project. Bad practices, they just spread without nobody saying anything. Suddenly you will see this and this and this copying that and starting this way of doing things. And that is why to have dictatorships in the hemisphere is bringing a lot of bacterial infections to our democracies. And I wish that one day we can have a hemisphere free of dictatorships, free of human rights violations, free of crimes against humanity. And that it will mean a step forward in our development, mainly because these dictatorships, if you see them, they are mainly failed systems. They have failed completely in social and production terms, and they have not been able. And even one of them is one of the richest countries that exist in the world, with a lot of oil, a lot of mineral resources, a lot of energy, a lot of whatever you want in this world, and now it's a broken country. How will you create that? Because of applying a formula that never worked. It is a formula of the ideology of dictatorship, and this is not for the right or for the left. This is the formula of a dictatorship, and that's why I started saying in this hemisphere what we see is that better democracies, better development conditions, better security conditions, better access to rights. We have a lot ahead, and definitely we need to address some of these issues, because they are like running out of control. Human rights violations, executives co-opting the judiciary, weak parliaments, and all this. It needs to be built if we want to be developed countries at a certain moment. If we want to have better conditions for the living of everybody in our societies. So sometimes people think this is a gloomy approach, and I say I will never be able to resolve my problems if I don't face them, if I don't identify them, if I don't know which are these problems. That's why we have to start from here if we want to have what the title says, strengthening democracy for progress and peace. That's it.
Sure, yeah. Hi everyone. As Claudia mentioned, I'm Ana de la O, and thank you so much. Thank you so much to Claes. Wow, I don't even feel it anymore. Thank you so much to Claes for the invitation to moderate this panel, and of course it's an honor for me to be here. Secretary General, thank you so much for those very thought-provoking remarks. And you have already touched on a few of the things that I was planning to ask you about, but I do want to start with the point about strengthening democracy. Because as both Claudia and you, Secretary General, mentioned, the region has made great strides at consolidating representative democracy, but there are signs of democratic backsliding in some countries, of course, and the democratic breakdown in some cases. And also, according to the last Latin American Public Opinion Project, only 60% of Latin Americans would say that they prefer democracy to any other system of government, which is quite alarming. And so I wonder, Secretary General, whether we have been focusing too much on the role of elections and free and fair elections in the region, and whether you think that there is now room to think about more direct forms of democratic participation. And also, your remarks make me think, when you talked about polarization, inequality, security problems, whether you think the region should be going in that direction or not, to more direct forms of participation.
Yeah. Strengthening democracy is a work for everybody. I mean, we have to start from the very beginning. We have to be better citizens, more tolerant citizens, and more flexible, and more looking at the perspective of what solutions we can achieve and how we can build better things for our society. So I always hope that we can engage in better informing people and being closer to the people in order to bring solutions in that may help everybody to be a better citizen. Of course, this is not the only thing. I mean, we need to have stronger institutions. So you were referring to some surveys and polls that, of course, there is not so much of trust in democracy these days, and but this makes me remember a phrase that my mother used to say, that was uno nunca sabe que está bien hasta que deja de estarlo. And you never know that you're fine until you are not fine anymore. And we have seen that because those that they miss democracy, in Cuba, Venezuela, those that in Nicaragua, they really want democracy back in their countries. So those that they are not so happy with democracy these days is because, of course, they are maybe more unhappy about lack of efficiency of their governments, or maybe not so good democratic governance itself. So that is the biggest issue. But we can build better democracies also building better institutions. We need better institutions these days. We need institutions that can help us with solutions and can help us in real time. If you don't have institutions, you stop helping people. If some countries, they have structural problems and their institutions have been very weak for decades or maybe more. And you have some countries where the deterioration of institutions have been more of a gradual thing until they are completely useless. And I don't like to mention countries, but the case of Venezuela is an example of that. Suddenly, the Minister of Health cannot deliver solutions in the health system. the Minister of Food, but cannot feed all the people of the country. The security, the Ministry of Interior cannot help people related to security matters, and they cannot even protect the territory. I mean, the armed forces of Venezuela went to fight the dissident of FARC in Apure, and they took a serious, hard punishment, beaten. So it's not even they can control the territory properly. So that is when you deteriorate the institutions to a level that you cannot help anybody and you cannot deliver solutions for anybody. So you need institutions that can be efficient. The messianic approach is, of course, a different way. I mean, the messiahs, they don't need strong institutions. They come by themselves and they resolve everything. But that at the end you see that doesn't happen, and in the process the deterioration of institutions can bring the country to a new level of problems. If we are ready to more direct forms of democracy, we are already doing more direct forms of democracy. We are participating every day in politics wherever we are, and wherever you are based and whatever is your country, you are able to participate in the political life there because you have a Twitter, a Facebook account, and then you can really create conditions for public opinion, and you can bring new issues to the political system. And it's a new way of participating, and it's a much more direct one. And I agree with that. But that it doesn't resolve everything that democracy needs. I mean, as I said, we need to face the problem of inequality. We need to resolve the problems of security. So we need to create conditions to better produce in the country, and that it cannot be done only chatting in Twitter or in a social media. There you have to really work, and sometimes the people forget that politics is working, it's service. I mean, you serve people, and you serve people with a purpose of making your society better. But you have to do things. You have to be a doer. You have to do. If you only want to talk about politics, yeah, maybe the social media will end only replacing our very, very serious conversations that we had in our bars and cafes in Latin America, but will not hardly be enough to resolve our problems.
Yeah, and so since you were now talking about inequality, so that seems to be a very big structural ancient problem in Latin America. And there was a point in time in the 2010s, more or less, where it seems that some countries had experienced a small decrease in inequality, and people started getting very excited about seeing a change in the trend in inequality. But of course, even before the pandemic, that reason for hope was already, we didn't have enough reason to hope that the trend was going to continue in that direction. So I'm just wondering, you mentioned corruption, you mentioned inequality, you mentioned discrimination. It all points to perhaps a broken social contract in many of these countries. That it's a very complicated problem because if governments don't have access to resources, so if tax revenues are low, people don't want to pay taxes, people don't trust that other people are going to want to pay taxes. It sort of traps countries in a negative equilibrium in a way, in a very negative cycle. I'm just wondering how to get out of it. And I wonder whether organizations like the OAS has sort of a vision of how to promote maybe tax agreements. I don't know exactly what would be the way forward. And is there room for international cooperation to get the country moving in the right direction?
International cooperation is always necessary, and you always have to to refer to some countries, some states, some nations that can be doing the things in the right way. So international cooperation, and you may need the assistance and the cooperation of these countries in order to better do a couple of things that you want to do in your country, my country. Yeah, I was part of a government that reduced inequality as much as we could, and we reduced poverty to 1 digit in Uruguay. And that is it can be done. It can be done, and sometimes people refer to Mujica and they prefer a lot more his philosophical part. I highly appreciate more his professionalism. He was a professional doing his job. He worked from very early in the morning. I was sure that if I was having a call 6:30 in the morning, it would come from him, and I was sure that if I was getting a call at 11 in the evening, it would be from him, and that he would have 20 meetings in a day, and that he would be on trying to deal with practically every single matter that exists in the country. Uruguay, we are very few, so you can do a lot of micromanagement when even you are, at the same time you can be doing high politics. And it can be done. It can be done, and you have to have the purpose of that, of course. You have to have the purpose of bringing more equal conditions to your people. If you don't have that purpose, you won't do it. But even if you work a lot, but that is a thing. You have to bring these solutions, and it's possible to achieve, and it can be done, and of course, and that is what I mean when. But you have to work the things in the long term. It is not enough to work for a couple of years, or to work for 10 years, or to work for 20 years. I mean, we are in a stage that we need to work very hard for longer than that. If our social contract is broken, no. I think the social contract that we have, and that's why I mentioned inequality, discriminations, paternalistic, etc., etc., etc. It was a failed social contract. Maybe it's not broken, and that is the problem. Maybe we have some people trying to hold to that old contract that it has 200 years or 150 years. But we cannot keep going with that social contract. We need a more efficient social contract. We need a social contract that can break with these structures, and that can help us to bring some of the real solutions that I have mentioned. So the problem is that maybe it's not broken, but it's a failed one. It took us for 200 years without delivering the proper solutions, and it's still there, and we have to deal with that, and that is the biggest problem. So we need a better social contract. With another problem, no? I mean, we don't socialize well. Our socialization also is not an efficient one. It's not the right one. You could see it during COVID times. You could see it. I mean, and you could see it in practically every country. Sometimes you had very strict measures of quarantine and all this. Suddenly, but you could see that at the same time there were people having clandestine parties of 500 people, and there were people having clandestine parties of less than that. But there were, and that is the thing. I mean, we don't have this thing that it may exist here, and I think existed, but I don't know so much of places in this history, but in Uruguay somehow existed this community life that exists here, that people are responsible for the neighbor, for what is going on with the street, with your sidewalk, with your tree, with everything. Is how you have better community life, and that means how you socialize better in a wider view of solutions that maybe. But a lot of things start by you trying to do things in a better way, but socializing better. If you just try to avoid the rules, avoid the norms, trying to create conditions where you can take some advantages, but you don't take the obligations and the duties, the responsibility that comes with us, will be very, very difficult. And that is another problem that we have. So we have this problem of the failed social contract, but we also have the problem of that the wrong way we socialize.
Secretary General, I think that we at this point might open the floor for questions from the audience, if there is one.
I have been so clear, I don't think they have questions.
Yeah.
Hello. So earlier today you talked about how platforms like Facebook
can you please, because...
With mouse?
Yeah.
Okay. Earlier today you talked about how platforms like Facebook can be used to express public opinion and used to kind of promote like democratic ideals. Also, we see how platforms like Facebook can promote like hyper-polarization, also like to spread disinformation, which can lead to democratic backsliding. I was wondering whether or not you thought that kind of like regulating these social media platforms should be an issue to be tackled by like the international community, or something to be handled domestically by each country.
You know, first of all, if you have common problems, try to resolve them together, because if not, you will only have a cockroach effect. I mean, you will stop it somewhere and it will just move somewhere else. So I think I was very tempted to whatever it works, and of course there are some levels of the things that they need to be addressed at the national level, because of course every country has different scenarios and they start from different points, and their social their freedom of expression or social media or whatever is completely different than the country a couple of thousands of kilometers away. So there are specificities that will be needed to address at the national level. But we need to see the common problems that this generates, and how we can help each other in order to avoid things that can come with the digitalization of politics. And you see permanently these days digital attacks coming to your country from wherever else in the world, and that is something, of course, that we need to have a better understanding of how our digital international relations should be. I mean, it cannot be a jungle. It cannot be like everybody trying to prevail with the worst tools against others. But how we can be helpful in order to create a better international community. And of course, any rules that you bring into the system you have to be design them extremely carefully, because any drop that falls, any drop of ink that falls on into the freedom of expression, it can be a serious problem. It will be a serious problem. So how you can manage that in order to create even better conditions for freedom of expression. And I am one of the most insulted people in media. No, all my adversaries, they have trolls and farms of trolls all around. I only have my humble account, and I can only say the most evident truth, because if one day I lie, I will be killed. And So, as one of the most insulted person in media, I can tell you that it's good to keep freedom of expression and to assure that by all means. And I don't have any problem with anonymous insulting me. I don't have a problem with that. But I may have a problem with anonymous committing crimes like pedophilia or something like that. So those things, and anonymity cannot be protected in those cases where you offend the law. But of course, and I consider that insulting a politician is freedom of expression. So it's fair you do that, and that can be assured.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Good afternoon. My name is Ega Hurbaladze, Fox International Fellow here at Yale. First of all, thank you very much, Secretary General, for your time and very interesting talk. If you let me, I have two parts question. The first is, you spoke a lot about democracy and its importance, and I wonder, of course I agree with that this is a very important value on which it's possible to build good governance, to develop rules in countries and in integrational processes. But I wonder if we take into account the example of China and we look how it becomes a great power, how its economy is growing, so accordingly the people's condition become better, living conditions become better. How we can, and taking into account what you said before about democracy, compare it with what is happening in China. And the second part of my question is, don't you think that such kind of building integration processes on such value as democracy reduces the capability of organization to other countries which I would say don't have democratic regimes? Thanks a lot.
Yeah, and I, of course, I will ask you to do so. I have always said democracy is the best in this hemisphere for development, security. In this hemisphere, I cannot go far beyond my jurisdiction, as you may realize. In any case, every country has different tools and different approaches. I served as ambassador of Uruguay to China, and of course I saw the process of a developing country, and you could see that every day. They were really economically growing and economically bringing better conditions for the people, and socially bringing better conditions for the people day by day. And practically every Chinese person was very optimistic that in the next year he would be better than this year, and that has been quite for the reason for an optimist for quite a while. They have a completely collective pattern of working. I mean, it's for them collective action and this bee spirit of doing the things together, the ant spirit of doing the things together, is a completely different one that we have in this hemisphere, Western Hemisphere so far. So. Of course, when we talk about systems, you can't. I don't know if I don't think you can never go to an agreement of any kind where you resign your liberties, your fundamental freedoms, your democratic rule of law. You can't resign that. You have to keep it with you, because that will be a bigger loss than anything that can happen. And of course, I always hope that in that process, more fundamental freedoms will be available for Chinese people, and that they may develop and evolve in that direction. And that is an imperative that, of course, we always have to have in mind. But what I say is that we cannot lose what we have about fundamental freedoms, because if we do that, we are going to really miss them, I can tell you. We are going to really miss them. And in this continent, the better our democracies work, the better our conditions for access to rights, for security, and for development. That is a fact in this continent. In this continent, I repeat.
Secretary General, we are out of time, but okay. I want to thank you so much on behalf of CLISE for taking the time, especially now, considering the circumstances, to talk to us. Thank you so much.
The weather, I suppose. You know.